Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, the Timberwolves opened the preseason with a win over the Nuggets on Saturday, but beyond the win, it's the preseason. So what stood out the most? Of course, it was the play of the rookie Joan Beringer, among other potential fringe rotation guys. The biggest keys, the biggest standouts from Saturday's preseason win. It's all coming next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. Happy Monday, everybody. Hopefully you had a fantastic weekend. Of course, the Wolves opened the preseason with a win over the Nuggets on Saturday. And some starters rested. We'll get into that. This was as much of what much of preseason is. It's a chance to see the young players, the fringe rotation guys. And I have some notes from Saturday's show, some guys that really stood out in a surprising way, some things that maybe weren't all that surprising, but still notable as the Wolves took on the Nuggets. And Denver was largely full strength. Nikola Jokic playing minutes, the Wolves playing the starters that did play for the entirety of the first quarter. So there were some things to take away from this that I think are significant. So we'll talk a lot about Joan Beringer. We'll talk about Rob Dillingham. We'll talk about some of the, hey, could these guys, will these guys for sure make the roster guys? Johnny Juzang, Bones Highland, a bit of discussion about those guys as well. So that's all upcoming here on the show today. A big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. All right, so of course, in the preseason, the result does not matter, but the Timberwolves did win. They beat the Nuggets by 10 on Saturday, and Minnesota did not start. Let's see. Mike Conley and Anthony Edwards both rested, and so did Julius Randle. So they had three regular starters not play, and of course Leonard Miller's out for a couple of weeks, so likely through this coming week at the very least with the finger. I think it was a laceration to his finger. So regular starters Jaden McDaniels and Rudy Gobert did play, as well as the next guys up in the rotation: Dante DiVincenzo, Naz Reid. And then Rob Dillingham started at point guard. So I don't think there's really anything to read into that other than they wanted a point guard to start. But of course, Dillingham is probably not in that top 8. TJ Shannon is probably number 8 in the actual rotation. But because Conley didn't play at all, Dillingham did get the start in this one. So no Ant, no Conley, no Julius Randle. For the Nuggets, they were pretty close to a full rotation like that. I believe that's the regular starting 5. Nikola Jokic actually played 19 minutes in this game, which was, believe it or not, a team high for the Nuggets, which is kind of crazy. For Minnesota, the starters played the entire first quarter, and then Rob Dillingham is the only one that played the rest of the game. Otherwise, rotation guys for Minnesota, like regular season rotation guys, it was those 4 starters. So Jaden and Gobert, the regular starters, Naz and Dante, regular rotation guys. And then the only other confirmed regular rotation player that came off the bench and played would be TJ Shannon, played 21 minutes. And I guess Jalen Clark as well, who will probably be in and out of the rotation depending on the night, played 20 minutes. And we'll talk about performances from both of those guys, of course, throughout the course of the show today. But I wanted to kind of level set with what Minnesota did from a rotation standpoint. Team high in minutes was a tie between Rob Dillingham and this year's first-round pick, Joan Beringer. Beringer also had the Timberwolves. He tied for he had the third most points on the team. Bones Hyland was second in minutes and led the team in scoring with 18 points. We'll talk a lot about Bones today as well. But I really want to start with my key takeaways from this game. And number one has to be Joan Beringer. Beringer was really impressive. And I'll talk about what he didn't do well first, because it's a much shorter list. He was bullied by Jonas Valanciunas, but who hasn't been bullied by Jonas Valanciunas? That's just kind of a rite of passage for an NBA big. And Beringer is a 19-year-old. Here's the thing. Berenger's only played basketball for less than 5 years. So for him to be taken into the post and taken to the woodshed, if you will, by Valanciunas is hardly an indictment. Jonas Valanciunas is a fantastic, and Jokic, like these are two of the best bigs. Obviously, Jokic, the best big in the world, and Valanciunas, at this point in his career is a backup big, but he's a phenomenal back to the basket center. And there's a small handful of teams, maybe a half dozen, where guarding the post is actually going to be super important, and Denver happens to be one of them. And Beringer did not look great defensively, guarding a guy who's probably twice his width in the post, backing him down. That's the list of things Beringer did not do well in this game. That's it. His feel on both ends of the floor remains remarkable. And I said this in Summer League as well. Given his age and his experience and really the lack thereof in both areas, he's remarkably good feel on both ends of the floor, knowing when to cut, knowing where to be as in the dunker spot, finding the soft spot in the defense. On the defensive end of the floor, the timing, the understanding of help defense. On the glass, very impressive on the glass. Minnesota, we'll talk about this overall, was very good on the defensive glass. Beringer had 3 offensive rebounds in 23 minutes, which is a really good rate. Was really good on the offensive glass. Again, feel is the best way to describe it. For a guy who's that young and that inexperienced as a professional basketball player, Joan Beringer's feel is absolutely phenomenal, and he looks the part. He can play right now. And I don't think he will on a regular basis. I don't think Beringer is playing, regular rotation minutes as a big for Minnesota this season. Like he's probably 12th in the rotation, quote unquote rotation. If you're 12th, you're not in the rotation. But he can play now based on what we saw in this game on both ends of the floor. And I think that, I know it's preseason, but again, Denver played basically everybody, and it's about the feel more than it is the actual result. And you can look at the box score number, and he put up 14 and 4, only 4 rebounds overall, 3 of them on the offensive glass in 23 minutes. And yes, he committed 5 fouls, and we'll talk about Minnesota overall committing too many fouls in this game. It was mostly the really young players, unsurprisingly, that had an issue there. But 14 and 4 in 23 minutes is a really nice performance from the Timberwolves' first-round pick and a teenager who very little is expected of this season in terms of actual on-court production. And that to me is by far and away the biggest takeaway from this game is how impressive Beringer looked. And again, not going to be counted on for rotation minutes early this season. But I'll tell you what, the impact he could have defensively as soon as some point this season. This is not I'm not talking about 2026, 2027. I'm talking about this season. What Joan Beringer can do defensively and as a role guy and a dunker spot guy and a lob threat and an offensive rebound threat, the activity level on the offensive rebound is a real thing based on what we've seen from the feel combined with the size and athleticism and the want to. It's all there for Joan Beringer. And I don't want to be too out over my skis here trying to describe this, but he could be a positive contributor now, given the right matchups. Caveats apply, but there's something there already, and the ceiling is very real. All right, I want to talk about a couple of other, I think, rotation, other notes that could impact the rotation. I would say rotation relevant notes from this game, and we'll do that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. It's their most advanced equipment yet, designed to give you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or cross-training with your favorite instructors. This is training reimagined. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with tools that help you plan, stay motivated, and reach peak performance. I love how the Peloton IQ system offers real-time strength coaching. It actually tracks your reps, suggests the right weights, and corrects your form, making every rep safer and smarter. The swivel screen is a game changer. You can go from running on the Tread Plus to strength training without missing a beat. Plus, the personalized class recommendations will keep you engaged. you can get workouts tailored to your vibe and your energy level each week. So let yourself run, lift, flex, and push forward. Explore the new Peloton cross-training tread plus today at onepeloton.com. Again, that's onepeloton.com. Spell it out, ONEPELOTON.com, onepeloton.com. All right, so we talked about Beringer. My next takeaway from this game, and I don't have this on the graphic there if you're watching on YouTube, but we got to talk about TJ Shannon. I was very impressed with what TJ Shannon was able to do when he got downhill. And I've talked about this on the show before, like what the Timberwolves want to and need to see from TJ Shannon. And if I had to pick one guy that I was most looking forward to seeing what he did over the course of the five-ish plus or minus game preseason schedule, it's Terrence Shannon Jr. I'm obviously curious about Beringer. The other guys we're going to talk about, I always think it's fun to look at the end of the roster battle. But TJ Shannon, I'm most intrigued to see how Minnesota uses him and how he responds to what the coaching staff wants to do with him. Because as of like a wreak havoc in transition piece, a guy who you just unleash in transition and say like, hey, wreak havoc, we know what TJ Shannon can bring, and he could do it as a rookie. We saw it in the playoffs. We saw it, that game against the Lakers when he started and scored, 22, 24, whatever it was. TJ Shannon could do that. But what can he do in the half court if he's put in an advantageous position? Like in this game, they got him downhill and dribble handoffs a couple of times. I believe he ran a couple of screen and rolls, but the dribble handoff when he gets downhill, which is really like when you think about early Ant career stuff, when Ant was able to create, and it's not apples to apples. They're not the same guy. They're not even really the same type of player. And TJ Shannon's a much older second year guy than Ant was in his second year. But that's when we started to see the seeds of, hey, Ant can create for others, is when they got him downhill and dribble handoffs. And Ant just had to, take a couple dribbles and make a read, right? Like, are they stepping up on me? Can I kick it to the far corner, to the weak side, and create a corner 3-point shot for my teammate? Can I dump it to the guy in the dunker? Can I take an extra dribble and throw a lob if the defender, pulls up, sucks up to try and guard me? Can I throw that lob to Beringer or Rocco Zakarski or Rudy Gobert, whoever's in the dunker? Or do I take the midi myself? Or do I, pump fake, step through, draw a foul, and make a bucket? Do I dunk over somebody? Like, what are you doing in that dribble handoff situation where you're getting downhill? And you're reading what that defender's doing in the paint. And he had a dump off to Beringer for a dunk. He had a kick to the corner for a three. I think it was Dillingham. It was like left side of the floor, kick to the right corner for a 3-pointer. If he could secondary play make like that, Minnesota, first of all, they need him to do it because that's the piece of the Nickeil Alexander-Walker role that they're recreating. Like, obviously, Rob Dillingham should be creating the quote-unquote point guard role piece of it. But if TJ Shannon can do that, like, that's essentially what Nickeil did. But TJ Shannon's more dynamic than Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Sitting here right now, Alexander-Walker's a better catch-and-shoot 3-point guy. He's a better defender. I'm not saying he's a better player than Nah already. But the ceiling is obviously higher. And if he can play make at that level, now we're talking about a player who is in the neighborhood of the same, like, overall impact, the total impact on both ends of the floor as a Nickeil Alexander-Walker. If TJ Shannon can get downhill and create for others and be a threat to score himself, which we know he already is, look out. I mean, he's a rotation guy he is already, but like, he's a legit rotation piece that could be a plus player overall. And you don't need to play him with a Mike Conley or Rob Dillingham or other, Bones Hyland or other guard. You might still some of the time because you don't want him like operating all the time in pick and roll. But if you could do some stuff where TJ Shannon's, taking a dribble handoff from Rudy Gobert and then, I don't know, like Beringer, again, isn't going to play rotation minutes, but in this scenario, maybe it's, I guess, taking the dribble handoff from Nas and Rudy's in the dunker or whatever. If TJ Shannon is able to read the floor and react in this way, that's a really big thing for Minnesota. Terrence Shannon Jr. downhill to me was next to Beringer was the next kind of I guess important piece that stuck out for me in this preseason win for Minnesota. Very impressive stuff from TJ Shannon, and I think could have a very significant impact if he's able to do these things. It takes some pressure off the idea of needing to play Rob Dillingham or needing to play a Bones Hyland, who we'll talk about next, which I don't think they do anyway, and they might want to anyway. But it takes some of that pressure off if TJ Shannon can provide a reasonable facsimile of what Nickeil Alexander-Walker did as a secondary creator the last couple of years for Minnesota as kind of the de facto backup point guard. Let's talk about Bones Hyland. That's a pretty natural segue as the other point guard that played in this game and essentially played the quote unquote Mike Conley role with no Conley in this game. Bones Hyland, as mentioned earlier, was second on the team in minutes with 22. He was first in scoring with 18 points on 8 shots. 3 of 4 from 3 and 5 of 6 at the line, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, only 1 turnover, and he had a steal. He did commit 3 fouls in 22 minutes. And Bones had a couple of ill-advised shots. That's what Bones Hyland does. I think this was just kind of a quintessential Bones Hyland performance. There were some high highs, and overall, you're going to take 18 points at 8 shots with only 1 turnover in 22 minutes 10 times out of 10. Like, that's a great, like if Bones Hyland came off the bench for Minnesota, played 22 minutes and scored 18 points on 8 shots, everyone wins. Like, that's what everybody wants. And with that, there's going to be some like weird clear out isolation forced 16 footers. Like, you're going to get a little bit of that, just as long as you don't get too much of it. And if he competes defensively, like those are the things you're looking for. Now, I also want to make sure to point out that like the Timberwolves are not expecting Bones Hyland to play rotation minutes this year, nor should they be. But it at least made me think, is there a possibility if Mike Conley doesn't quite look the part early in the season? Like, is there a possibility that Chris Finch could be like, all right, I'm going to turn the keys over to Bones Hyland? I hope not. I hope that Conley looks great, and I hope that Rob Dillingham looks the part for a lot of reasons. But Bones at least looked the part enough that, it wasn't long ago he was a rotation. Like, the Clippers thought he could be a rotation guy for them last year. And he was a significant part of what Denver was doing a few years ago, and of course was drafted by Tim Connolly. That's all well documented. So I don't think there's expectations here of what like Bones Hyland is ultimately going to do or provide necessarily. But I was mostly impressed by what he brought to the table in this game. And if nothing else, it kind of underscores why he's I would have said before this game, and I guess I would still say he's like, what, the 12th guy for Minnesota? Is a high variance guy where if you've got a back-to-back in Conley's sitting and somebody's in foul trouble and someone else is injured and whatever, you just turn it over to Bones Hyland and say, hey, man, could you go score 22 points in 18 minutes? He did the opposite. He scored 18 points in 22 minutes in this game, but whatever. Can you score 18 points in 22 minutes for us and help carry us to a win? Like, that's the type of high variance performance you can get from Bones Hyland. And I don't think Minnesota wants him. I certainly don't think they should want him to be playing 22 minutes on a nightly basis. And I don't think that's the plan. But if you're in a pinch, can he win a game for you? Yeah. And that's kind of where Bones Hyland is at. And obviously the Wolves like him from a locker room standpoint or whatever else. But that's kind of my Bones thoughts from this game is I was overall impressed by what he did, but it's not a tenable situation long-term with him in the rotation. I have a couple other notes here about some fringe rotation guys and draft, rookies, newcomers, etc. A couple notes overall from this game that I want to hit here to close out. That's what we'll do here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors over at FanDuel. The NFL season is, let's see. Tonight is the end of week 5. Believe it or not, week 6 is around the corner. Very hard to believe, but I guess we are in October. FanDuel has an offer that you won't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, Put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Monday Night Football tonight, Chiefs at Jaguars. Kansas City favored by 3.5 on the road at the Jaguars. I like that. I like Kansas City minus 3.5 at minus 110. Kansas City money line is minus 215. Probably just take the lay the 3.5 here and pick the Chiefs in this one. That is what I would do. On Thursday, the Eagles are at the Giants. The Giants had a disappointing loss after a big win the week prior, but a disappointing loss this week. At home, they're 7.5-point underdogs to the Eagles. I don't know. I think I would actually, I don't know. The Eagles minus 7.5. They had a tough loss on Sunday. I think they'll bounce back. I'd probably go Philly and lay the 7.5 in that one as well. So taking favorites and the spread in both of these games is what I would do. But there's lots of fun bets you could consider here. Of course, live betting is always fun, especially when there's just one game. I always enjoy that. So you could do that on Thursday as well. Or maybe you want to do a same game parlay. That might be a good play as well on Thursday night, Eagles and Giants. So what are you waiting for? No matter what you want to do, visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. All right, let's close out today with a couple of more notes from the Timberwolves preseason opener. We talked Beringer, we talked Terrence Shannon Jr., we talked Bones Hyland. Let's talk Jalen Clark. Jalen Clark, point of attack defense in this game was on point. It is exactly what you might expect. I thought he was active offensively, made the right plays offensively, had a couple of offensive rebounds, moved the ball, misses only 3-point shot, which is, I think, the biggest question mark with him this season. He did not shoot it well in Las Vegas Summer League. It's one of the things I pointed out early in the offseason is, yeah, he was over 40% from three last year, but it was like 85 attempts or something. It was under 100 attempts. I think under 90 attempts in the regular season last year. Jalen Clark is not a 40% three-point shooter, but can he be close? I think is the big question. What is not a question is if he's a good point of attack defender, if he's great on the ball, because he is. He's fantastic on the ball, and he showed that in this game. If you just glance at the box score, you see 2 points on 4 shots, only 1 steal. He did have a block, so 2 stocks in 20 minutes isn't bad. A couple of offensive rebounds. It doesn't really jump out. But Jalen Clark continues to cement himself as a plus on-ball point of attack perimeter defender at the NBA level. He just is. He's fantastic on the ball. And there's a lot of matchups this year he's going to really dominate when he's guarding the basketball. So another really impressive performance from Jalen Clark. And the more experience he gets, the better he's going to be. And the question is, can he contribute offensively? And that's going to be, again, it really depends on the matchup. You look at your top 7, we know who that is in the rotation. TJ Shannon's number 8. That 9 spot is some combination of Rob Dillingham and Jalen Clark. And Jalen has to show what he did in this game, which, he didn't make a 3, but he moved the ball. He made the right reads. That stuff's important too. And if he can show that consistently, then I think he could end up with more consistent rotation minutes. Johnny Juzang. I want to talk about Johnny Juzang. He is on we believe, a non-guaranteed contract. The Wolves did not announce it, but the rumor is that it's probably an Exhibit 10 or at least a partial, probably non-guaranteed contract. Could he get the final roster spot, standard contract spot? Yes. If the Wolves do fill the roster entirely, Bones Hyland has a partial guarantee between him and Johnny Juzang. That would be the full roster. And I don't think Minnesota fills it unless Johnny Juzang really pops in this preseason, because the Timberwolves want that flexibility. And if they keep somebody, they lose the flexibility of the roster spot, and it starts getting a bit dicey, even dicier than it is already with that second apron. But Juzang did pop in this game, I thought. I mean, some of the shot selection was a bit spotty. He's trying to win a spot, so I wonder how much of that plays into it, and if Minnesota, if when the front office is making these decisions with the coaching staff, if they factor in hey, this man's trying to make a roster spot, he got a little, ISO heavy, just trying to get a spot. But I don't know. I don't know if they how much they weigh that. He was 3 of 7 on threes. He was 3 of 6 on twos. Had a couple of forced mid-rangers that are not his game, but also catch and shoot threes, quick release. It seems like that's sped up over the course of the first couple of years in his career. He was a rotation guy for Utah. We talked about him last week. Chris Finch had talked a bit about him in his interview with Britt Robson at minpost.com. Britt had asked him about Juzang's potential impact, and Finch talked about how if he shows defensively, they think he can be an even better shooter than he's been. He profiles well physically. 16 points on 13 shots in this game, 6 boards, which is really nice. If they can get more rebounding out of their wings, that's going to make a big difference. He's a big-bodied wing, and that matters. And I thought he was impressive in this game. So if he shows enough, again, if he pops over the course of preseason, he's going to get every opportunity to do so. There's a possibility he makes this roster outright out of training camp. So that's certainly something to keep an eye on. Rocco Zikarsky, second-round pick this year. He's on a 2-way contract for Minnesota. 9 points and 8 rebounds. And get this, just 13 minutes. 3 of his 9 points came at the free throw line. He had 5 offensive rebounds in 13 minutes. 1 steal. Great activity. I was impressed with the overall, again, I'll use the word feel for a teenager that Minnesota has. He's not an NBA player yet. It's too clunky. It's too disjointed is not the right word. It's just not quite smooth enough. But the presence, the feel, at risk of sounding like a broken record, is there for Rocco Zikarsky. And 9 and 8 in 13 minutes is a nice NBA preseason debut for Rocco Zikarsky. I thought he looked the part of a deep bench big who is so painfully young. I'm very curious to see what he's able to do in the G League this year, where he'll inevitably get quite a bit of opportunity. So I wanted to shout out Rocco there. A couple other quick notes. Minnesota held Denver to just 7 offensive rebounds, which is a nice number. If you can hold the opponent to single-digit offensive rebounds. Now, maybe some of that is preseason kind of lack of effort, but lack of activity on the offensive glass for the Nuggets. I get that. In fact, none of their starters grabbed an offensive rebound. So pretty unusual for Aaron Gordon and Nikola Jokic, neither one of them to grab an offensive board. And all their starters played at least 15 minutes. So that's notable. But 7 overall is really more of a, I'd like to look at it as a glass half full for Minnesota than it is a glass half empty for Denver, or an indictment on what the Nuggets were doing. So really nice to see Minnesota hold Denver to just 7 offensive rebounds. That's something that, of course, occasionally can be an issue, although last season Minnesota did finish 12th in opponent offensive rebound rate, according to Clean the Glass, which is, more than passable for a top 6 defense. To be 12th in opponent offensive rebound rate is fine. And so I wanted to point out how good that was in this game for Minnesota. The last thing is the Timberwolves fouled a little bit too much, and that's something they improved last year. They were top 10 in opponent free throw rate. They were much better over the course of last season. They're still prone to stretches where they're too foul happy, and that popped up a little bit in this game. Overall, Minnesota committed 24 fouls to Denver's 22. The Nuggets attempted 28 free throws. Minnesota attempted 26. So it was across the board in this particular game. Kind of a lot of fouls. It's first preseason game. Guys are sloppy with their movements defensively, not shuffling their feet like we're going to see, come November. But overall, that's something to keep an eye on for Minnesota. Again, worth noting, Dillingham had 4 fouls. Dillingham had 4. Beringer had 5. Those were kind of the primary culprits. I mean, they combined for 9 of the Timberwolves' 24 personal fouls in this game. All right. Minnesota wins by 10 in the preseason opener. Beringer, TJ Shannon. Those are easily your headliners. Bones Hyland, big game. Johnny Juzang, good performance. Minnesota's next preseason game is on Tuesday. I believe it's against the Pacers. At home. Well, actually, no, it's not at home. Where is this game being played? I don't think it's in Minnesota, and somehow I lost it, but Minnesota's playing the Pacers on Tuesday evening. So Tuesday's show, we'll talk more broadly about preseason stuff overall, what to look for moving forward throughout the preseason. And that'll be kind of a bigger picture type show. And then Wednesday will be a bit more of a post-game pod on the heels of Tuesday night's game against Indiana. So that's what we'll do here. Of course, we're daily Monday through Friday. And of course, a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. You can watch on YouTube. You can watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. Of course, Again, a big thank you for making this show your first listen. For your second listen, you can check out the fantastic Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast with our guy, Josh Lloyd. It's the #1 fantasy basketball podcast, giving you daily tips and helping you win your league, all while making you a smarter NBA fan. Find Locked On Fantasy Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Of course, this show is also part of that very same Locked On Network, your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.